Colonial slavery greatly influenced the age of abolition as it revealed many of the cruel truths within enslaved life and inspired many enlightened thinkers to question their long held beliefs about freedom and humanity. Beginning in the 15 to 1600s, colonizers originally took the idea of slavery from Native Americans, whom captured slaves among themselves after raids, wars, or by being traded between the different tribes. As it became more traditional, the treatment of slaves became worse as time went on. The first ship of slaves to arrive in the colony of Britain, Jamestown, was called 20 and Odd, getting its name from John Rolfe due to there being about 20 Africans on the ship. Because of the expensive nature of shipping slaves from Africa, it wasn't as prominent as it was only a century later when the cost of slaves outweighed the cost of shipping them. As the cost of slaves began to decrease abruptly, the purchase of slaves through the Atlantic slave trade began to increase. Crops such as sugar, tobacco, and cotton were being sold in more immense amounts due to the amount of labor being put onto plantations. The conditions of the slaves on the ships were inhumane to say the least. There was overcrowding, starvation, and abuse throughout the entire trading system for the Atlantic slave trade. With this news, it inspired many enlightened thinkers to begin to write content against the slave trade. The Selling of Joseph is a memorial illustrated by Samuel Sewall that was published around the 1700s in New England. He was the author of the first anti slavery tract, inspired by a Boston petition for freeing of a Negro and his wife who were unjustly held in bondage. Sewall was not fond of the enslavement of African people and the slave trade taking place, refuting many of the justifications they hold for colonial slavery with the same religious practices the colonizers claimed. With the rise of slavery and the dehumanizing laws trapping enslaved people within North America, it laid the foundation of what influenced the abolitionist response, turning into a movement. It caused debates on what the American institutions were built on for this emerging nation. Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe was a famous book depicting how slaves lived in captivity. It showed the inhumane conditions and treatments slaves endured during their time in captivity. More people started to oppose slavery after the release of this book. Then, in late 1700s to 1800s, arguments continued to rise surrounding slavery and its legacy. It sparked the abolitionist movement, mainly in the North, influenced by the Enlightenment ideals, Christian beliefs, much like Samuel Sewall, and the obvious conflict between emphasizing American freedom but having slaves. Colonial slavery wasn't the only reason that led to the American Civil War, but the discourse over its existence and expansion caused issues between the North and the South, as the North was fighting against slavery itself, while the South was fighting to uphold it. There was a rise in many questions and debates. Enlightenment thinkers, prominently known as Quakers, strongly opposing owning humans as property. Their messages became widespread, influencing the hundreds of people around them. After all of the spread of debate and fury, this only partially concluded in 1863 when President Abraham Lincoln finally gave his famous speech, the Emancipation Proclamation, setting all slaves free on the opposing side of the Civil War. The last enslaved Africans living in Texas received the news of their new freedom on June 19th, 1965.